There's a new report revealing that man right there, the Democratic Pennsylvania Senate candidate, John Fetterman, sends his kids to an expensive private school, while in public he has in the past opposed school vouchers for less affluent families, saying in 2018, quote, "I do not support expansion of publicly funded charter schools, taking money away from public schools and putting them into charter and private schools does not solve anything." Really? Let's talk to Boys Latin of Philadelphia Charter School co-founder and senior fellow at the Commonwealth Foundation, David P. Hardy, who joins us from the Philly area. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, it's great that Mr. Fetterman can afford to send his kids to that expensive school, but a lot of people who would like school choice can't afford that.
Okay, first of all, Mr. Fetterman needs a primer in school choice because he's confusing charter schools and vouchers. Charter schools are public schools. They're privately run public schools. The voucher allows a student to take public money and go to a private school, like he did. Now, Remember, this guy was the mayor of his town, and he sent his kids out of that town to a private school and left all the other kids there. You know, that's not a good look for him.
Yeah, no kidding. And you are at a charter school, which receives public money, and so you're not in the same boat as, for instance, the Catholic schools, the parochial schools, the religious schools. They would, and during the pandemic, we did some stories about how their enrollment were taking off because suddenly parents were unable to send their kids to a physical school in the public sphere, and so they wound up going to the Catholic school, but they had to pay on their own dime. And that's not fair. If you're going to pay taxes for education, why not make it a voucher so you can take it to the Catholic school or take it to another private school and spend the same money where you can get a better education often?
Well, it's part of the hypocrisy. They make people think that the only way to fund public education is to do it through government-run schools. And that's just not the case. We don't do that for food. We don't do that for housing. We don't do that for health care. We don't have to do it for education either. Yeah. We can have multiple ways of educating, multiple options, many sectors. I think one thing this pandemic has showed us that there are lots of ways to skin this cat, and we need to start making sure we fund them all.
Absolutely. Ultimately, though, Mr. Fetterman is a Democrat, as Joe Biden is, and one of his constituencies, the school unions. This really is a protect the school unions thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a very difficult situation for Democrats to be in because there's a lot of Democrats, including Joe Biden and our current governor of Pennsylvania and our gubernatorial candidate, who all send their kids to private school and went to private school themselves. They're 2 generations away. I say our current governor hasn't had a family member in a public school since before Pearl Harbor. So, I mean, the point here is that we need to get people to stop acting like there isn't a reason to get away from those schools. If you go to a public school, it's a monopoly, and their job is to keep things as minimalized as possible. That's what a monopoly does. But what happens is if you have money, you can start to do things. You can hire a tutor if you have money. You can buy a house in a better school district if you have money. You can send your kid to private school if you have money. But if you're poor, you're stuck. And Mr. Fetterman and Mr. Biden and Mr. Wolf, all these guys need to understand that their policies are hurting the poor. That's who gets hurt with this.
Your analysis is so spot on. I haven't heard many people describe it so clearly. David P. Hardy, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Steve, for having me. Have a great day.
You bet. Great meeting you. By the way, we did reach out to Fetterman's campaign for a statement, but you know what? Hasn't got back to us. If he ever does, we'll let you know.